call them, early make-ready projects that are actually already under construction. There are other projects that are about to start construction, and then is the major terminal takedown construction items, and those will be delivered to the contractor in January so that they can bid and procure services for that and start the work about the beginning of March.
So you have a general contractor, is a Belfer Beatty, and who's the designer on the job?
On this terminal, Jacobs is the prime designer, and they have a
Jacob
large
Design,
team
okay.
assembled to assist with all that design work.
Thank you. I'm confused on what the gap is going to be between that 150-day construction period that you identified as the minimum amount of time for construction and when customers are then going to be allowed to visit the site, given the different phases within the phase. Could you elaborate on how long that thing might sit there empty?
You say might sit there empty, but that's not necessarily true. What I said is that the construction zone may be available for build-out in advance of that final 150-day period. It doesn't mean you have to move in to build it out. Okay, so concessions down around gate A11, A13. Okay, that area will actually be completed by the general contractor. The shell space will be finished and ready for final build-out before a concession space around gate A16. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be built out. But if it is, then it would sit there unoccupied until the general phase is open. Does that help?
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Thank you. At some point of the design or construction planning, was it taken into consideration to add additional access routes? For example, loading docks that are for use by the concessionaires or possibly in use by concessionaires. I know the new terminal, I believe, has loading docks for getting things into the concessionaires' locations instead of having to go through the front access points. Could you touch on that if that's been taken into consideration for the redevelopment plan?
Certainly. That issue has been studied extensively throughout the, and hang on, let me get back to the slide here. Come on. Okay. During the master planning phase that was reviewed extensively during the programming and schematic phase, it was designed schematically. Different types of loading dock configurations have been priced, and right now some of those areas are add alternates into the program that may still be built. None of those will be accessible during the initial construction phase, though. So if there is a central terminal dock zone, it will, it really won't help during this initial build-out. And if it does, it would be just purely coincidental. Did that answer your question, sir? Okay.
Am I next? My question is, in phase one, we have the gate 8 to 16. My main interest is gate 26.
Yes,
what
sir.
kind of timing is on gate 826?
Okay. As the initial phase completes in 2012 and the next phase of work begins in the central section of the terminal, it will be closed in phases. So in 2013, that second phase of the terminal will open up. So at some point prior to that opening, at least 150 days, that those spaces will be available for build-out. Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
All right. Well, I don't see any further questions at this point. If you do have more you think of later, some of the new presentations or the additional presentations coming up may spur some questions. Just write them down, and we'll get them all answered for you. So thank you very much for your attention this morning, and I would like at this point to introduce Stephen Park with Corrigan, and he is going to talk more about the concession space build-out and about all the dynamics with the new as like the ceilings and the new front portals.
Thank you, Dwayne. Again, my name is Stephen Park, and I'm acting as I guess, the lead designer for Terminal A with Corgan Associates here in Dallas. It's an architecture firm, part of the design team led by Jacobs. And I was asked today, asked to talk today about really the design direction that we've come to for Terminal A, and I think specifically the passenger experience as it relates to not only using the terminal, but the concessions, how that all works together. As you know, terminals have a primary objective of getting passengers onto planes, and the concessions have to work their way into that whole experience. But the two activities really form a synergy between each other, the concessions and the passenger experience in the terminal, to work together for success. And how we do that is not as easy and straightforward as it might seem, particularly with an aged terminal that we're dealing with here at Terminal A. So we initially looked at Terminal D for our inspiration, and many of the things that went right are working very well for us in Terminal D as a starting point for what we might do in the terminal relifing projects here specifically with Terminal A. And you can see here, if you know Terminal D, where we're meeting today, the concession areas are designed to form large villages, very concentrated areas with a clear theme of concessions. And really their strong point is, as far as the passenger experiences them, they know where the concessions are, they experience them, and they have a very clear viewpoint of them. Here you see a graphic of a large concession hall, very brightly lit, a very clean language, a clear delineation between what are terminal areas out in the gates, and then here more of a concession-oriented type of space. So we took that very seriously. How could we do something like that in Terminal A? I think another thing that works very well in Terminal D is just the clean aesthetic. There is a very conscious design intent in that facility to create almost a neutral backdrop to all of the things that are being featured. And here you can see there's a mixture of terminal type signage in the blue, as well as concession type of signage, and concessions themselves, vendor areas themselves, almost placed on feature, on display, and the terminal, a very large facility, is not getting in the way, almost like a museum steps back to feature the artwork that's on display. That's very much what Terminal D does, the net result being that the passenger, when they experience a very large space with a lot of complex decision-making points and activities to find their way to, has a very clear and cogent experience and can find what they want to get to, whether it's a gate or in this particular circumstance, a concession or a choice of different concessions. They're very clearly, it's not hard for them to do that. You can see here, this shot also shows some of the volumetric wayfinding that Terminal D takes advantage of very successfully. There's a big, large, open space filled with light. It's intuitively obvious that's the place to go to continue your experience and look for more concessions. So some very simple and straightforward concepts in Terminal D applied very successfully and carried through into the details of the design that has worked very well and served the interests there very well for both terminal and concessions functions. So the question we asked ourselves was, well, how are we going to apply these ideas to Terminal A, which doesn't have the type of volumetric opportunities that Terminal D does? It has a very strong concrete, if you understand architecture from the brutalist era, this very strong and muscular, heavy concrete architecture, low ceilings, very long spaces. How do we translate these type of ideas over to those terminals? Well, what we've done is tried to not only take some of the language, the finished surfaces of the architecture in Terminal D, and you can see here, this is a clip from that video that you saw before,